ऑपरेशन सिंदूर अभी खत्म नहीं हुआ है। 22 अप्रैल को पहलगाम में, जम्मू कश्मीर में आतंकियों ने जो बर्बरता की, उसके बाद पश्चिम बंगाल में भी बहुत गुस्सा था। आपके भीतर जो आक्रोश था, आपका जो गुस्सा था, उसको मैं भली भांति समझता था। आतंकवादियों ने हमारी बहनों का सिंदूर मिटाने का दुस्साहस किया। हमारी सेना ने उनको सिंदूर की शक्ति का एहसास करा दिया।
भारत के लिए नहीं लड़ रहे हैं, केवल अपने उसूलों के लिए नहीं लड़ रहे हैं। हम आज सारी दुनिया में जो दबे हैं, सारी दुनिया में जो वर्षों से, आज के नहीं, जो सदियों से दबाए गए हैं, चाहे वो अपने दबाएपन को न पहचान सके, वो अपनी गुलामी को नहीं पहचान सके, लेकिन हम पहचानते हैं और हम जानते हैं कि उससे आज हम नहीं लड़ेंगे तो यही धक्का हमको लगेगा। पाकिस्तान अगर आज कमजोर है तो मैं बहुत दावे से कहती हूँ कि वो देश जो उनको हथियार देते आए आज तक, उन्होंने कमजोर करा है पाकिस्तान को, और अगर पाकिस्तान को हानि होगी तो उनको मैं दोष देती हूँ कि उन्होंने ये हानि की है। और आज जो हमसे जलते हैं, क्योंकि इस किस्म की मदद हमने किसी से नहीं ली, वो इसी वजह से नहीं ली कि हम जानते थे कि हमारी आजादी अगर कम हुई तो किसी की मदद हमको मजबूत नहीं रख सकती, और अगर आजादी पक्की होती है तो बिना किसी के मदद के हम मजबूत रहेंगे, जरूर रहेंगे, और जो हमें करना है वो करके हम दिखाएंगे।
Yesterday in Bengal, at a campaign rally, our Prime Minister said that today when I have come to the land of Sindur Khela, Shitur Khela in Bangla, I will naturally discuss India's new resolve against terrorism. The terrorists dare to erase the sindoor of our sisters, so our army made them realize the power of the sindoor. We destroyed the terror bases in Pakistan, which Pakistan could not even imagine. And in a rally before that, he said something like, "Ya to roti khao, ya goli khao, ya bum khao," something of that sort. A strange thing, these sentences. So casually surreal, it could belong in a Marquez novel. Were it not the utterance of the most powerful man in the world's largest democracy? That India, a self-declared ancient civilization that we like to call ourselves, would now narrate its foreign policy in metaphors drawn from matrimonial cosmetics is not merely bizarre. It is symptomatic. Symptomatic of a nation that has traded strategy for spectacle, diplomacy for drama, and substance for sound bites. See, there was a time, not mythological time, not overtly romanticized time, but recent, when India conducted its wars, however despicable wars are, like a republic of grown-ups. For example, when Nehru, responding to John F. Kennedy's moralistic unease about Goa, the reunification of Goa into India, reminded him that even peace requires action. That while India remained committed to non-violence, it would not outsource its sovereignty to the sanctimony of Western onlookers. This was in response to a letter Kennedy had written to Nehru through his ambassador Galbraith about how he always assumed that India is a saint and preaches non-violence to the world, and it does not fit them to behave like this in Goa against the Portuguese. Kennedy used this line in his letter that it seems like the preacher has been caught with his pants down, but tells you like the kind of the way someone like Kennedy looked at India and Nehru. The interesting bit is I recently came across Galbraith, who was Kennedy's man in India, and has held several key positions in the US government during Kennedy, before and after. I got hold of his autobiography, and the cover page of his autobiography had a picture of Kennedy with Nehru. I mean, just something that I noticed. In 1971, when Pakistan's genocide in East Bengal demanded a response, India did not gloat. There were no fireworks, no filmy backdrops, no hashtags. Even Kargil, um, a war forced upon us in treacherous conditions, was met with a certain amount of restraint. Vajpayee did not, to his credit, need to shout from the rooftops. He commanded respect by behaving like a man who understood that real strength spoke softly. But the India I see now, and please feel free to disagree with me, feels less like the world's oldest civilization and more like a drunk Fufaji at a wedding, demanding respect simply for being a Fufaji, without displaying any shred of gravitas. Today, we don't just fight wars, we merchandise them, package them, sell them like reality television. Operation Sindoor hoardings across many cities across the country. Army chiefs being invited to IPL finals. Film award show recently, I saw the ad of Zee Cine Awards, now doubling as war reenactments. The whole thing has the subtlety of a mall store Diwali and the dignity of an Instagram reel. This is not nationalism. It is nationalized theatre. And amidst this theatre, one inconvenient truth gets lost in this whole confetti. The single biggest outcome of Operation Sindoor has been the rehyphenation of India and Pakistan. For 2 decades, India had a core strategic objective, dehyphenation, to be seen as a power in its own right, not eternally tethered to the ghost of partition. It had in many ways succeeded. The world began to see India not as one half of a hostile sibling rivalry, but as an independent actor on the global stage. And now, post Sindoor, we are back to square one, firmly rehyphenated, back in the same bracket, back to reacting to Pakistan instead of transcending it. Even if one were coldly utilitarian, even if we cared not a fig for ideals or human lives, this reversal should be seen as a strategic catastrophe. Avoiding this rehyphenation was arguably worth 27 lives, and yet we threw it away, willingly, gleefully, for a few days of jingoistic applause. Who will take the blame for this failure? What strategic genius decided that it was worth mortgaging our hard-won diplomatic autonomy for a short-term boost in domestic optics? What vision of nationhood is this, where we are willing to govern people without their consent, whether in Kashmir or elsewhere, and then willingly pay a high strategic price to maintain that illusion? It makes no sense, none at all, unless the goal is not nationhood, but domination. Not stability, but perpetual crisis. Not resolution, but spectacle. War and the emotions that come with it have become part of a broader machinery of myth making. It is no longer a response to crisis, it is a festival, a set piece, a vulgar display choreographed for the algorithms, a morality play where every citizen has a role, cheer, chant, and comply. Perhaps it was always performative to a degree. Perhaps even our myths were written with an eye on the audience. But there was once some amount of decorum, a self imposed restraint in how we behaved, a refusal to turn every border skirmish into a red carpet event. Today's India, meanwhile, it demands not stoicism but applause, not analysis but allegiance. The roar of jets is not a cause for reflection, but a cue for choreography. The army is no longer a constitutional instrument of defense. It is a band, a logo, a background prop for the spectacle of power. And that is where the story really begins. Nietzsche in The Birth of Tragedy wrote of how ancient Greek rituals transformed individual suffering into collective affirmation. The anguish of Dionysus, raw, rapturous, and uncontained, was ritualized into spectacle, made safe for the city-state, transmuted into chorus and masque. The personal was aestheticized, the tragic was tamed. Today, the same thing plays out across our streets, screens, and hashtags. But now it is not the suffering of the gods we sublimate, it is the bodies of our soldiers, the grief of their families, the hollowed out silence of what should be national mourning. The dead are no longer being mourned, they are mobilized. Their absence becomes not a void, but a symbol, their memory a screen onto which we project our certainties. Grief should be private. It once used to be a private wound, is now a public performance. It is no longer an expression of pain, it is proof of allegiance. We are no longer expected to feel sorrow, but to display it, loudly, uniformly, according to script. It reminds me a lot of the death of North Korean leaders and how people are demanded to cry. We are, we are still some ways from trying to cry on television performatively, but are we too far from it in the way we are behaving? Please remember that a mourning, any kind of mourning, in such circumstance, that does not challenge power, but bends the knee before it, is not mourning at all. If your grief does not dare ask, why did this happen? We have internalized the idea that the only respectable response to tragedy is obedience. To mourn quietly, critically, or with questions is now to offend the gods of national sentiment. But the questions remain. Where are those 4 or 6 men who butchered people in Pahalgam? Why do we know the name of an Ajmal Kasab? Why do we know the precise number of terrorists neutralized in 2611? Why were we shown video footage, dossiers, a narrative, and yet in this case no such clarity is demanded necessary? Why is the architecture of propaganda so efficient, but the machinery of accountable so opaque? Pulwama, in fact, is not ancient history. It is not partition or the emergency or the Mandal riots. It happened just some time ago. And yet already it has been buried. We do not know what lapse caused it. We do not really know who caused it, how it was caused. There's no official timeline, no transparent report, no clear answers. But there is one clarity in one thing. We were told to feel, not to know. This is, as I said, not uniquely Indian. I talked about North Korea, but historically the Romans too understood the political utility of public grief. Public lamentation was part of their imperial pageantry. Death reimagined not as loss, but as legitimization. Martyrdom was not the end of a life, but the beginning of a narrative, one that served the empire. Today we do the same. We have our own modern day, Luddites, not chariot races and gladiators, but Twitter trends and studio debates. We do not grieve, we stage grief. And like Orwell's 2 Minutes Hate, the ritual is not designed to heal, but to homogenize. The weeping is choreographed, the slogans pre-approved, and our woes betide those who fall out of step. Because in the theater of perpetual crisis, ambiguity is treason. Hannah Arendt, who I keep going back to all the time, and I kind of hate that the world we live in is such that we have to keep going back to her writings. But she warned us that the death of the question is the birth of tyranny. When doubt is equated with disloyalty, when inquiry becomes indistinguishable from insurrection, democracy ceases to be an open forum and becomes a closed loop of affirmation. India today does not mourn its dead by seeking truth. It mourns them by suppressing inquiry. The soldier is honored, but only insofar as his death can be used. The citizen is free, but only so long as she remains silent. The intellect is respected, but only if it genuflects before the flag. To ask how or why something happened is now to invite suspicion. To demand accountability is to risk being branded anti-national. We have replaced the Republic of Reason with the Republic of Reverence. The burden of mourning has shifted from the heart to the megaphone. Instead of echoing where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, we now inhabit a land where the mind must be without friction, sanded down, lubricated by slogans, not sharpened by thought. And what is a nation that fears its own questions, if not already halfway to forgetting its answers? This silencing is most deafening in the aftermath of violence. When tragedies strike, whether in Pulwama, Pahalgam, in Manipur, a familiar choreography is set in motion. The images of sacrifice, pixelated portraits garlanded by news anchors, funeral music, beneath flames that lick the screen. Then the declaration of unity, urgent, hollow, performative. And finally, the most sacred commandment of our times: thou shalt not ask questions. Was there an intelligence failure? Could this have been prevented? What are the unintended consequences of our policies? These are no longer inquiries in a democracy. They are treated as barbed insinuations, as betrayals cloaked in civility. The state does not refute them, it refuses them. These are not questions, it insists. They are accusations, and accusations must be exiled. But remember this: it is precisely in moments of upheaval that a polity reveals its soul. It is easy to tolerate dissent in times of calm. The test of democracy lies in whether it can endure scrutiny when the drumbeats of war or grief threaten to drown all nuance. Democracies do not survive despite dissent in crisis. They survive because of it. When the Modi government revoked Article 370, it promised peace by proclamation. A fantasy of order conjured not through dialogue but decree. Like Kipling's colonial catechisms, it was a vision where the natives were to be administered, not heard. Order, it seems, must now descend from the heavens, not rise from the ground. And to critique such moves is no longer seen as engagement. It is seen as sedition. Treason thinly wheeled behind the wheel of thought. The dead in this schema are not mourned by reform, they are mobilized as symbols. For over a decade, we have been serenaded with tales of Prime Minister's global gravitas. Forget Kashmir. Think about it. Think about how propaganda works. Like for 10 years, we have been told that Modi ji ne duniya mein danka bajwa diya hai. That his personal chemistry with world leaders is beyond anything that has ever been achieved by any other Indian leader. His lionized stature in foreign capitals, his command of the stage from Madison Square Garden to Sydney to wherever. Very well. Then why the sudden urgency to dispatch opposition MPs to explain India's position abroad? Why this sudden reliance on the very institutions you once ridiculed as irrelevant? If the personal rapport is so robust, then pick up the phone, dial Trump, call Macron, text Starmer, send a selfie to Meloni. Why outsource credibility if it has already been consolidated? Observe one other thing: the visuals of these diplomatic delegations, the footage that circulates of Indian MPs explaining India's position on the latest India-Pak issue. Curiously, the audience is never shown. Who is being addressed? Are we to believe that the invisible diplomats just sit spellbound behind those solemn nods? Or is it all a theatre of projection, where the real audience is not in Brussels or Berlin but scrolling WhatsApp forwards? Your uncles, your papas, and everyone who sends you WhatsApp forwards. Perhaps this opacity is not an oversight. Perhaps the invisibility is deliberate. For in an age where performance eclipses policy, it matters not whether the audience is real, only that it is watching. And in India, the only audience that really matters has already been carefully cultivated. It lives in the echo chambers of forwarded messages. in the imagined camaraderie of nationalist telegram groups, in the synthetic unanimity of TV studio panels. Their nuance goes to die, and spectacle is reborn. And this is the architecture of propaganda. Its builders are not amateurs. Edward Bernays, the architect of modern public relations, once said that the manipulation of public opinion is not a betrayal of democracy but a cornerstone of it. And so we see how Indian media, social platforms, and state machinery converge to manufacture consent. Nationalism is not argued for, it is injected, like a sedative, into the bloodstream of our discourse. Reasoned dissent is met with character assassination, and emotion becomes the state's preferred instrument of governance. Bernays would have marveled at this efficiency. Meanwhile, Kashmir is still bleeding, still beautiful, and still silenced. It becomes less a place and more a metaphor. As Perry Anderson wrote, Kashmir is no longer a territory in Indian discourse. It is a lodestar. Its suffering is necessary for national cohesion. Like Ireland in Yeats's poetry, it is a land soaked in blood and abstraction, where human beings are reduced to geopolitical metaphors. Agha Shahid Ali wrote in 1987, and it still holds. This is from his poem, from his book Postcards from Kashmir. That Kashmir shrinks into my mailbox, my home, a neat 4 by 6 inches. This is home, and this is the closest I'll ever be to home. When I return, the colors won't be so brilliant. The Jhelam's water, so clean, so ultramarine. My love, so overexposed. And my memory will be a little out of focus. In it, a giant negative, black and white, still undeveloped. This was written in 1987, and 38 years later, it still is true. The people of Kashmir are no longer citizens with rights and voices. Perhaps they never were. But even more so now. They are symbols in someone else's story. Their pain is archived as statistic. Their agency erased with broadband cuts and curfews. Orwell once drew a clean line between nationalism and patriotism. Nationalism, he said, is rooted in power, the lust to dominate, to expand, to erase differences. Patriotism, by contrast, is an act of love, the kind that reforms, that questions, that holds the beloved to account. In today's India, the line has not merely blurred, it has been willfully redrawn. To love the nation now is not to improve it, but to obey it. To dissent is not to care too much, but to be cast out as an enemy within. In the Hindu nationalist imagination, patriotism has been reconfigured into devotional obedience. It is no longer a self-rule cultivated through moral courage and civil disobedience, but something closer to Carl Schmitt's authoritarian vision. Sovereignty as the right to suspend all rules, to decide who belongs and who does not. It is the power to carve exceptions in the name of national survival, where law bends before loyalty. Here, the state has become a jealous god, a god that demands not just submission but sacrifice. To question it is blasphemy, to serve it is salvation. The citizen is no longer a stakeholder in the republic but a devotee in the temple of Bharat Mata, where the Prime Minister dons the dual robes of priest and sovereign, and the most sacred offering is silence. The whole testosterone of this spectacle of militarism, the roaring jets, the clenched fist, the slogan promising to enter their homes and strike them down again and again, this is not strategic defense. It is ritual theatre. Nietzsche called it reassentment, a borrowed strength, a vicarious power, where those rendered powerless seek catharsis in fantasies of revenge. Insecure regimes often trade complexity for performance. And India today, anxious beneath its gilded GDP charts, compensates with muscle and roar. The Hindutva narrative is not one of maturity or wisdom. It is not the slow, patient work of nation building. It is myth and muscle, sword and slogan. It channels the spirit of Mussolini's Italy, where virility stood in for virtue and propaganda for principle. It believes that the louder it speaks, the more legitimate it sounds, but noise is not authority. Decibels are not destiny. And yet, the question remains, the most dangerous question of all. Who benefits? Cicero once asked, and the question still slices, he said, cui bono? The pattern is too well to ignore. A tragedy happens, the media whirls into frenzy, a cry for unity, and then an election victory. The Reichstag fire, the Gulf of Tonkin, these were not anomalies, they were templates. In Modi's India, trauma is not a moment of reckoning, it is political currency. Outrage is repackaged, recycled, redistributed across banners, speeches, and WhatsApp forwards. Mourning becomes marketing, and accountability, it disappears beneath the clay lights of televised nationalism. There was a time, not long ago, when a home minister resigned after failing to prevent carnage in Mumbai. The gesture, however symbolic, acknowledged a principle that power and responsibility must walk hand in hand. Today that idea seems quaint. In its place stands a colder arithmetic. Failures no longer erode regimes, they feed them, because truth no longer wins election, narratives does. We are no longer a republic of responsibility. We are an empire of affect. We are governed not by reason but by reaction, by sentiment, not scrutiny. The louder the wail, the deeper the silence beneath it. And so we return to grief, but not as solace, but as mourning. Not as mourning, but as performance. The dead are no longer remembered. They are taken altogether. The stories are no longer told to heal, they are wielded to command. The funeral has become a festival. And the nation in this festivity has already forgotten the names of the mourned. But here's the thing. Memory, real memory, rebellious, restless, unresolved, has always been a dangerous thing. Those of us who still believe in it must insist on remembering. We must insist on naming, on asking why, on resisting the demand for convenient silence, on refusing the script, not because we hate the nation, but because we know that love does not mean submission. Because true patriotism begins not in spectacle, but in scrutiny. Because real patriotism begins where propaganda ends.
Roy, you speak with passion, but really your credibility as a champion of the dispossessed is questionable. This is because you are driven by all-consuming rage towards India. I don't know what drives that rage. With all its faults, India is the world's largest democracy. If you were Chinese, you would not be able to speak as you do. It is the democratic process of India which manages to stop powerful companies like Vedanta. You need to take a more wholesome view of India. Allow your mind to at least list 3 good things of India and spell them out, and you will have a more receptive audience. The unity of India is not negotiable. Jeremy Paxman the other day picked many holes in your argument, and you need to know this, and you have to be able to answer this. The point is this: you just slipped by saying that this Hindu state is doing something. The Prime Minister of India is a Sikh.
Could I ask people
Let
to
me
keep
just finish, just 1 minute.
To keep it short, to keep your point short, please. Yes.
The Prime Minister of India is a Sikh. Sonia Gandhi is a Christian. There are Christian missionary evangelical movements who are spending money and fomenting trouble in India. You need to answer these questions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Arundhati is very happy to answer this, I'm sure. Yeah.
I'm more than happy to answer the question. I think that the most remarkable and wonderful thing about India is the fact that we have the most remarkable resistance movements resisting. You have the poorest people in the world resisting the richest corporations, putting their bodies on the line to ask the world the most profound question the world can be asked, which is to redefine the meaning of civilization, to redefine the meaning of happiness, to redefine the meaning of modernity. As for this question of if you were in China, you would not be allowed to speak, and Felix too said that if it wasn't a democracy, you wouldn't be allowed to write. It's true. I mean, one is not competing for tragedy here, but but one sec. But can you? So what I would like to say, though, however, about this freedom of speech in India, can you imagine a few years ago, as you all must know, in 2002, there was a pogrom against the Muslim community. I mean, forget about the fact of what is happening in Kashmir, that 70,000 people have been killed in the name of democracy, but let me just talk about Gujarat. There was a pogrom in which almost 2,000 Muslims were killed, women were gang raped, people were burnt alive, 150,000 people were driven from their homes. In one instance, an MLA, a Muslim MLA called Ehsan Jafri, was sheltering many Muslims in his house because he was a member of a legislative assembly, and people thought that he would be protected, that they would be protected from this mob of about 20,000 who gathered. Anyway, the mob gathered, he called the police, he called Sonia Gandhi, he called whoever he had to call, nobody helped him. He went down to tell the mob, look, do what you like with me, but leave the women and children alone. He was held up, his arms and legs were hacked off, and he was burnt alive. And 65 other people were killed in that. A few years later, people who did that confessed on camera to it. Those confessions in this great free speech that we have were published on TV. You had people like Babu Bajrangi boasting about how many Muslims he had killed. You had people boasting about how many Muslims had been raped. You had people describing in great detail how Ehsan Jafri had been killed, all in our free media. Nothing has happened because of that. People said it was actually a campaign by the chief minister to get more popularity among his Hindu voters. So you have a situation in which the elite is fused with the state now and believes itself to be the state. So it's not, those of us who are saying these things are people who love our rivers and our mountains and who are fighting we love the music of the country that we come from. We love it. We don't speak from a position of hate. We speak from a position of absolute love. And that is why we fight so hard. If there wasn't beauty to preserve, if there wasn't absolute adoration, we wouldn't be there. We wouldn't, I would be living in, Mayfair Gardens or something, Why? One lives there because one loves it. And we fight to preserve the wilderness and the beauty of the imagination that still exists, that's still alive in India, which has been lost everywhere else. We fight for that. So please don't give me lectures about hating my country. I don't.